and welcome to Miniature Addiction Club. My name's Lou and today we're going to be doing a little Q&A video, as well as sharing some of my favourite projects, tools and materials with you. I've been making miniatures for some time now. I think I started back in 2016. And even though I've been making miniatures for nearly 9 years, my YouTube channel is only around 2 years old. And I've recently just hit 13,000 subscribers, so I thought it would be nice to answer some of your questions and give you guys a chance to get to know me a little better. As well as being a miniaturist, I'm also an artist, and I always dreamt of starting a YouTube channel for my art, which I eventually ended up doing back in 2022. And yes, I rocked a shaved head back then. But I wasn't really happy with the content I was making, and I decided to start a second channel as a practice channel so I could work on my editing skills and try and perfect what I was doing so that I could make my art channel better. These are some of my acrylic paintings, and I will link my other channel below if you want to go and check it out, even though I no longer upload any art-related videos. Anyway, that's when I decided to turn my other hobby, making dollhouse miniatures, into my second channel. I used to make and sell miniatures at markets, but I took a break from that to focus on my art career. As it turned out, my practice channel became more popular than my art channel and soon took over everything, and that's where Miniature Addiction Club began. I would love to keep working on my art channel, but I also work full-time in an art supply store, and sadly I just don't have time to keep 2 channels going right now, especially as I still create artwork and exhibit regularly, so it can be a bit of a juggling act trying to do all the things. So that is a little bit of backstory as to how this channel began. Now let's answer our first question. Where is your accent from? I live in New Zealand with my fiance and our 2 dogs, Delilah the pug and Daphne the griffin. I was born in Australia and I have lived in New Zealand for over 20 years now, so I would say I have a New Zealand or a Kiwi accent. What inspired you to make miniatures? I think there were lots of factors that contributed to my path to becoming a miniaturist. I have always loved miniatures and always wanted a realistic dollhouse when I was a child. I talk about this a bit more in my miniature collection dollhouse tour video, which I will leave linked below. But basically, I saw some realistic life-size food made from polymer clay, and I went on YouTube to see how it was made. That's when I discovered miniature polymer clay food, and specifically Tanya Jensen's Sugar Charm Shop channel, which well and truly got me addicted to miniatures. And that also partly covers this next question. How did you get started in minis, and what inspires you? I'm inspired by lots of things, and I have so many ideas for different projects I sometimes don't even know where to start. Last year I made a miniature based off of Fallout, which is one of my favourite Xbox games. I'm also currently working on a couple of projects inspired by my favourite movies and TV shows. I also happen to be a qualified interior designer, so I get a lot of inspiration for rooms from different interior styles, like this Moroccan room box I made. Although I have a diploma in interior design, I've barely spent any time working in the industry. I could never decide on a single area to get into, like kitchen design or soft furnishings, because I wanted to do everything. And I also didn't like the idea of working for a client because I wanted to create my own visions, which I guess I get to do now, only in miniature form. Which brings us to the next question. What's your favourite miniatures to make, and what are your favourite materials and tools to work with? My favourite miniatures to make would have to be smaller projects. I love the dopamine hit you get after making something in one sitting. If a project drags out too long, I tend to lose interest in it and it doesn't feel as rewarding when I eventually finish it. As for my favourite materials and tools, I love working with literally everything. I love using fabric to make cushions like these, and I have a huge fabric stash for future projects which I have organised in Ziploc bags of different colours. I also really enjoy using real wood to make furniture and floors, as you can stain or paint it to achieve so many different finishes. And I will always have a special place in my heart for polymer clay, as it was my first medium that I used, which brings me to these questions about the type of clay I use. I mostly use Sculpey Primo. I do sometimes use Fimo, but I find Sculpey a lot softer and easier to work with. I use coloured clay where I can, but if I do need to add colouring or shading, I use soft pastels before baking, or sometimes watered down acrylic paint after baking. I bake all of my creations in this mini oven as it's more economical and the fumes stay in my studio instead of my kitchen. I also have a thermometer in there so I can check the baking temperature, and I cover my sculpts with tin foil to avoid burning. A new material I'm enjoying at the moment is UV resin. I love how quickly it sets and how versatile and cheap it is compared to epoxy resin. And of course, I love using bits of random junk to turn into miniatures as well. I really enjoy turning trash into treasure and making something out of reused materials that would have otherwise been thrown away. Over the years, I have amassed quite a collection of tools. However, my most used ones would have to be my double-ended dotting tool or ball stylus, along with a silicone shaper, and a pin or needle for sculpting clay. I also use my craft knife a lot, and I try to keep a good one for cutting paper and a not so good one for cutting clay or messier materials. A small metal ruler is also a must. And I use these small fine point scissors or nail scissors for precision cutting. I also use my mini saw and miter box or miter cutters for cutting wood, both of which cut straight as well as at an angle. I also like to keep a bunch of emery boards on hand for sanding things. And my favourite glue for making miniatures would have to be Aleene's Tacky Glue. It's multi-purpose, dries clear and relatively quickly. And my favourite tool of all would have to be this desktop vacuum cleaner, which I purchased from Temu. It works really well and makes cleaning up mini messes a breeze. Karen asks, do you ever call a project finished, or do you tinker with it every now and then? I have to say, I generally like to finish a project and not tinker with it. I like to move on to the next project and focus all of my attention on something entirely different. My attention span doesn't really allow me to go back and tinker with things too much. I always move on to the next shiny new thing. And Abby asks, what's one technique you just can't seem to get right? What's the first miniature you ever made? What miniature are you most proud of? And which would you most likely make over again and try to improve upon? These are all really good questions. I guess the technique I couldn't get right was in my recent bubble video. I got good results once using the wrong colour dishwashing liquid, and I just didn't have the patience to keep trialling different brands and different ratios of dish soap and Mod Podge. So in the end, I wasn't really happy with it, and I know I could have done better, but I had to upload the video as I ran out of time, and because I'm such a perfectionist, I really didn't enjoy posting something that didn't turn out as good as I had anticipated. But I think it's important to share when things don't always go as planned. My first miniature that I made was a polymer clay croissant, which I accidentally burnt. I remember taking it to work to show my colleagues, and they couldn't even tell what it was. I also made some loaves of bread, then I moved on to making donuts and burgers and eventually cakes. And it all spiraled out of control from there. These are some of my earlier miniatures that I made that didn't get thrown away with the croissants. The miniature I'm most proud of is a difficult one, but I think it would have to be my ice cream cart. I was still fairly new to making miniatures when I made this, and it was the most complex thing I had made at the time. I liked that it combined lots of materials like wood, fabric, and polymer clay. I even made the wheels entirely from scratch, and I love how the tubs of ice cream turned out. I was also very proud of the light I made for my Fallout miniature, as it was my first time attempting anything electrical without the help of my fiancé. And I have to give a special mention to my upholstered footstool. This has been my most popular video to date with over 178,000 views, so thank you to everyone who's watched that one. And the miniature I would be most likely to make over again and try and improve upon would have to be either the bubble cauldron or the miniature wedding cake replica I made for my brother and sister-in-law. I wasn't really happy with the scale or the cake topper, which I would like to try and make again sometime. And that brings us to the end of the Q&A video. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss any new uploads. Thank you all so much for your support and for taking the time to ask me some questions. If there's anything at all that I've missed out, please leave it in the comments below and I'll try to answer it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Even though I've been making miniatures for nearly 9 years, Even though I've been making miniatures for nearly 9 years, Even though I've been making miniatures for nearly 9 years, my YouTube